Well, Tim, usually when we hear the name Hobey Baker, we usually just associate it with the best player in college hockey, the award presented every year. But your book right to our left here, Hobey Baker, Upon Further Review. Tell me about the process, how this kind of unraveled, how you kind of started this idea, and how you kind of approached it.
Yeah, well, it started like 100 years ago in 1991. A wonderful Sports Illustrated article came out when I was going to be producing the NCAA championship game. And it was 3 weeks prior, and they talk about his exploits as a member of the St. Nick's Hockey Club, which I was belonging to at the time. I go, this is a good story. So I went and burned the whole budget of the NCAA productions and spent a night in the edit room and made it all about Hobey Baker. I twisted and turned a little bit, and I got some funny looks from my bosses, but it was a great open, and I'd been chasing the Hobey dream, thinking it was going to be a documentary, and suddenly the last 100th anniversary of anything of significance, his death, was coming up, which was December 21st of 2018. I said, well, I got a deadline. I didn't get any funding from Princeton for the documentary, so I'll write the book, because I had just written another book, and that's how it came to be.
So you did a lot of research on this. I know you were at St. Paul's a lot, you were at Princeton a lot. Is there any other places that you kind of dug to get some more stuff upon Hobey, or we'll talk about the process at St. Paul's and Princeton as well? Sure.
Well, St. Paul's is really where he accumulated those, I call them the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. He skated his butt off there and skated at midnight where he couldn't see, and that's where he became the supreme stick handler. I spent a ton of time at the Princeton archives. My son was there, and then my best friend Joe McCarthy was there, and I really lived in their archives starting in the early 2000s. I was pulling notes from way back then because I was trying to get the documentary going, so I had a lot of notes, spent a lot of time in there. There are hundreds of letters. Hobey was a copious letter writer from World War I France when he was a fighter pilot, so I had a lot to work with there. But there's also a big cache of information from Philadelphia, where he was first raised, and what was going on with his tombstone. There was a lot of history there. I won't bore you with that now. But also when he was growing up, the official biography of Hobey that was written in '65 had him growing up in sort of preppy, mainline, wealthy Pennsylvania suburb, but that's actually inaccurate. The first 8.5 years of his life, he was living right off of Wissahickon Creek, and a person from the Lower Merion Historical Society gave me that tidbit, and then I found out it was the #1 skating facility in Philadelphia. So there he is every day walking through the woods, 500 feet, it's been measured.
As a young boy?
Yep, with his brother, who was 1 year older, so he had a foil to play with all the time. So he by the time he went to St. Paul's, he was already an accomplished skater and hockey player.
Who do you think had the biggest impact on Hobey's life? You could date it back to his earlier years or maybe even his later years.
Well, I think it was being abandoned by his mother, which is, a little bit of a soap opera, and that what really drove him. That and having a brother 1 year apart. His family life really decayed, so they let him be raised up at St. Paul's School in Concord, 7 hours away, so he never really came home after that. And so he was being raised by the proctors of St. Paul's School, and he had a brother to compete with, and it was just an absolute hockey factory up there. So having a brother to kind of calm his insecurities and to compete with and against up at St. Paul's, and being, really, if you had to say one thing, it was really the St. Paul's School. Yeah.
Well, you did tons of research. What's the most intriguing kind of story about Hobey that you find most interesting?
Geez, there's a couple of them. Oh, here's the one. The official biography had him kind of leaning toward learning how to fly to prepare for World War I. And what I'll speak to tonight here in Winnetka is that some researcher in Pittsburgh discovered some ad from a scrapbook of Hobey Baker plays here, and it was a month after the official farewell to hockey. Supposedly, in all the 3 books prior, he had played his last game in February of 1917, prior to World War I, and had scored a goal, but lost to Ottawa. Turns out he goes to Pittsburgh in March, plays on the biggest ice sheet ever, 300 feet by 120, and there's 3 newspapers documenting this, and he ends his career in triple overtime, rink-length rush, and that's a more fitting farewell to Hobey Baker. I saw that, I wrote a whole chapter about it.
Yeah. So, people, they associate Hobey Baker with hockey, but he's much more than just a hockey player. If you had to tell just an ordinary fan or anyone out there, what one thing about Hobey other than his, obviously, creativity and his excellence on the ice, what would it be?
Well, I like to call him Jim Thorpe in a tuxedo. He played 5 sports his freshman year at Princeton. Then they said, look, you can only play 2 sports. And he chose football and hockey, and I can explain that later in the discussion. But I think he could have been an Olympic gymnast. I think he could have been an Olympic swimmer. He was a brilliant swimmer. He was a great road runner, too. Like they have a road race called Hounds and Hares up at St. Paul's. He would only run it once a year, and it was a school full of 350 athletic boys, and would win it every year. Just amazing. He's cardiovascular, but maybe a gymnast. He might have been, the best thing might have been as a gymnast. He could control every muscle in his body.
Well, you worked on this forever, it seems like, obviously. What's up next for you?
You know, I don't know if I got 300 pages in me anytime soon, but Willie O'Ree just went into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I saw there was a children's book about a golfer who had broken the color barrier. I go, I know I can write the book on a hockey player who broke the color barrier, so I'm going to chase the Willie O'Ree children's book if possible.
All right, we're going to mark that down then. We'll be looking for that one in the future. But Tim, once again, congratulations.
Cam, always good to see you, man.
Thank you.
All right, take care.